Hey, how we doing? Today's video is, I'm going to title it Russian Current. We're going to talk about current going into the battery when the alternator is running and charging. So many situations happen when a charging system has an issue, either an alternator issue, a wiring issue where the alternator is not charging the battery and the battery is running on its reserve capacity. And by the time the car gets to you, it may be on the hook, it may be just barely able to start. The battery light may be on the dashboard, and you've got to deal with it. And you got to perform service, and you have to possibly change the alternator, most likely, or fix maybe a wiring issue or something. But nonetheless, you have to get the charging system working again. It may have run strictly off the battery, off what they call the reserve capacity of the battery, and the battery is quite weak. When we fix a vehicle like this, after we make a repair, like change the alternator, or maybe put a belt on or something, we want to make sure that the rush-in current, by the time the car leaves, is less than 10 amps. If the rush-in current is excessive, it's going to hurt the new alternator, and you may have repeat alternator failure. So it's one extra thing to check. When we check a charging system, we want to look at current going into the battery when the charging system is working ideally or optimally. Anyway, we just have 3 channels here. We have a current clamp on the output of the alternator. That is channel A, blue. Channel B, red, is the current clamp at the battery. So that's going to be current going out of the battery cranking and running into the battery charging. So we're going to look at cranking amperage, then we're going to look at rushing current, or how much current is getting put back in the battery. And we want to take a look at the situation. The starter is just shown in the illustration. You can take a snapshot of this. It's not going to be, the starter will be working in this, but we're going to get all the amperages at the negative side of the battery. On channel B, red, I'm using a Pico 2200 amp clamp to get better resolution. I want the high range for the cranking and the lower range for the running to kind of get a better granulated view of the rush-in current. I will do this demo with 3 different batteries. The one in the car now I'm going to call bad to marginal. One is good and one is probably not so good, but we'll learn along the way. I'm going to do everything live and on the run. I'm going to flip the batteries out. There is the one in the car. There's the amp clamp. There's another amp clamp at the alternator. These are the 2 other batteries. They may need some assistance in cranking the car, but that has yet to be determined. So here we're going to put you on the scope. We got just 3 channels we're dealing with. Red is the current coming out of the alternator. This is frozen, car's not running yet. Green is the battery voltage. I got a leads on the battery, looking at the charging voltage or cranking voltage, and red is the current going into or out of the battery. So I'm going to start the scope and go over and see if the car starts, and we'll just kind of go along and analyze. Anyway, here we go. Started. Okay. Let me stop the scope and we'll kind of analyze. First of all, I want to talk about, we'll let it run a bit. Right now you can see the rush-in current, we can see the charging voltage, and we can see the alternator output current. So let me stop it and we'll, let's go back to the first screen and analyze all the events from start to finish. Basically, here we are. Okay, here's our starting right here. We'll take a look at the green guy first. That is voltage, okay? Our open circuit voltage before I started it right here was about 11.98, which is not good. That is not a charged battery. Usually you want to be about 12.66 or in that range. If it's higher as a service charge, you don't want to be usually anything lower than 12.5. 12.25 is about 3/4 discharge, and 12 is flat. This one was flat. You heard the slow cranking, and we'll definitely look and analyze the waveform. One thing I can tell you, the weaker the battery, usually the more the rush-in current to charge the battery. So as far as our voltage where it dropped to, I'm going to say about 5.3. That's horrible. You don't want to be south right in this point, right at this little point on the scope. I've heard about an 8.5, but that's a small window of time. But the normal range right here, that's bad too. That's 7.83. You want to be about north of 10.5 here. As far as our current, our max current, we got in about 414, which is low. I've seen this go higher. Probably should go higher. I just want to talk about the blue guy. That's current coming out of the alternator, and this is that moment where the alternator had to replenish that hole in the battery. And from window of time, that's really high. That's 97 amps. That alternator has potential. It's not a long period of time, but nonetheless, it's an indication that the alternator was able to put back in, I guess we call that electron hole in the battery that the battery used to start the car. Let me move on in the capture, and we'll start to look at that rushing current. We'll talk about it. Right now, it's rushing in. And let's look at the blue. That is the current clamp at the battery, looking at current going. It's going to be a negative number because of the way I have the clamp. I'm sorry. That is red. Blue is the alternator. Red is our current going into. We are negative. Our rushing current right here is minus 16. So that's a little excessive. I would not cut this car loose to the customer. First of all, you're dealing with a bad battery, but that, where I said I've always learned you want to be south of 10 amps going into a battery, because that could prematurely wear out an alternator, cause an alternator to get hot and overwork itself. Right now, I'm gonna change the clamp to a 200 amp range, so we can maybe get a more granulated look at the current flowing through the car. So let me just do an adjustment. This is a 2,200 amp clamp. I'm gonna change the scale. I'm gonna go to 200 amps. I'm gonna tell the scope that on channel B, and I'll do this for each battery. I'm gonna tell it 200 amps because this clamp has two ranges. It's very accurate. It's a good clamp. And then I'm gonna go to about how about 50 to get a better depiction. I'll start the scope. I will zero the clamp. It has a button, a zero button. You'll see that zero in it. Then I will see how much current's going into the battery. This is our rushing current. We're going to see it as a positive amount. Let me lower that and bring that down. And we could remember, okay, that's our current going in. As it runs across the scope, I will stop the scope. We will analyze it. Go right in the middle. Okay, that's I guess that's pretty good corroboration between the high range and the low range. 16 amps going in. That is high. We'd want to probably, you wouldn't expect the alternator. Don't expect the alternator to charge this. I would actually slow charge this with a trickle charger before you just cut it loose. Alternators aren't really designed to do that. It could overwork the alternator. So as I learned, you want to be south of 10 amps up here before you cut the car loose. We can also see the diodes right here. That looks like a pretty good rectification pattern. Anyway, right here, between here and here, I'm not on an AC scale, but I was always learned 300 millivolts AC. You don't want to be anything different than that. Obviously I'm on DC, but between here and here on the AC scale, you don't want to be anything more than 300 millivolts AC. Nonetheless, that is, we can also see that on our charging, on our battery voltage going in, and we are about 526 millivolts. Anyway, if I really want to look at it, I don't want to deviate from the nature of the thing. If I wanted to go to AC voltage, I will do it just because I talked about it and I feel like I want to give it to you. I will go to DC, AC, and we'll talk about, sometimes we work impromptu. We want to go to 1 volt, and we start, and then now we're AC coupled at the battery. Some people say you could do it at the alternator. This is decent. They say a better picture is at the alternator, but right here, let's look at this. I'll open this up, and then we'll go here to here. We should be within 300 millivolts AC. And we are at about 483, so that's a little excessive. I don't, could be an issue. I don't have any symptoms of AC ripple. Nonetheless, let's get back to the subject at hand. This is our first battery, and you remember the numbers. Let me shut the car off and make a flip. I'll put another battery in the car, and we'll see what's going on. on this. I'm gonna flip this battery. Let me get this off. Let's get here. Let's get here. Alrighty. The battery I'm going to put in is probably the weakest of the three, so we're in for some maybe some unexpected situation. We'll just deal with it. Okay. Okay, get our equipment back up. We're going to put the amp clamp on the high range because we're going to crank this thing. So we're back to, we rolling? Okay, we're back at, I'm sorry, leave that one alone. That is the alternator clamp. Sometimes when you got multiple clamps, you get confused. We're going to go back to 2000 amp clamp, 2000 amp. I'm going to go to one right there in that range. I will keep it at 2000. Current will be going this way. That is our cranking current. You'll see that. And our voltage will be at the battery. We're still on the alternator with the other channel. Make sure we're running. Okay. We'll see what happens with this clamp. Stop. Let's go. Okay. Let's get our green guy back to DC. DC and 20. 20 here. Okay, we're back to normal. I don't think, we'll see what happens here. We'll just basically analyze. We're at the alternator on blue. Okay, I'm gonna crank it and see what happens. Weak battery, and we'll take a look at what a weak battery looks like on a scope so we can get an indication. I will stop the scope. We will roll it back, and this thing's pretty weak. It's pretty anemic. As far as voltage, the drop is very low. We're talking 3.6. That's egregiously low. The current coming out of the battery only went to 213, and that's not enough amperes to start the car. And alternator really is doing nothing because it's just not able to spin. So basically, I'm gonna see if I could get this battery help. I'm gonna try to jump this thing with another battery and see what happens if I can get it running. Then we'll look at that rush-in current, because that may be high because this battery's so weak. We'll just see what that is. So anyway, I'm gonna help this puppy out. It may see if it does start. Okay, let's get the scope running, see if we catch what's we have. I'm just jumping it with another good battery. So let's see what that does, and I'll be around. Okay. It started with a jump battery, with another battery. I'm gonna pull the battery off and see what it does by its lonesome. And we'll look at its rush-in current. So let's stop the scope and roll back and take a look at our initial reading where we were. Our current in red, let's see here, our current went to about 376. It did have a secondary battery. Where our voltage go? okay, it went down to about 517. That's its real, what do they call it? It's little, I call it the tip. Very small window of time. That is low. I've always learned north of 8.5. Then in our normal cranking voltage, in what we call the relative compression zone, we're about 8.3, and that is low. As I said, that should be about north of 10.5. So we're low either way. It did. This battery did start with assistance, and the alternator was able to put back about 100 amps. So the alternator is doing its job. I will, as I said, flip the B clamp because I want to get it more into a tighter range to look at the inrush current, because that's what I want to talk about. So I will flip the clamp to the 200 amp range, zero it out, and okay, 200 amp range in there, and we want to go to about 50 amps to look. We'll start it up. We're zeroing it. You can see the thing move up and down. I'm zeroing the clamp, and now I want to see the current going into the alternator. This is the bad battery that needed help. Okay, let's take a look and see what we got here. The car's running. Let's kind of look at what we got. I will stop the scope. We will roll it back. We'll filter just so we can get a better look at everything. Take a look at green first. That's our running voltage, our charging voltage. We're about 1368, which is good. Our current coming out of the alternator is about 34 amps. Okay, that is that is good for idle. Now let's look at our rush-in current. How much of the 34 amps is the battery getting? It's a battery consumer. That's a little high. Okay, that's sort of high. I'm right in the middle of the red zone, and I'm about 20 amps. So this battery would need to be slow charged. You wouldn't expect the alternator to do this. You don't cut this loose to the customer because you could have an issue with the alternator overworking. You trickle charge it in the shop, and then get it to the point where the rush-in current is south of 10 amps. Anyway, so that's this. This is probably the worst battery of the three. I will stop the car, and I'm going to put we'll determine. I'll put the third battery for the demonstration, and we'll see what that does. Rolling. Okay. All right, turn the clamp off. All right, we are still rolling. 17 minutes in. All right. See what this one does. Okay, let's get our leads back on. We got our amp clamp. I'm going to go to 2000 because I want to get see what this thing does cranking, and I'll change the scope channel on channel B now. It's I want 2000 amps, and I'll go to 1000. I'll go range right here. That'll be B. Alternator will on the clamp at the alternator will stay the same. Let's cranking, so we're going this way. Okay. Okay, now we're at a rest voltage. You can take a look at our open circuit voltage on green, where I said it should be 12.66 or better. 12.51, that's good, probably about 80% charged. Let's let me start the car and see what happens. We're on a 200 amp range coming out of the alternator. We're on a 1000 amp range coming off the battery to the starter. and on a 20-volt range on the battery itself. So I'll crank away and let's take a look. Stronger. That's good. I figured this is the best battery of the bunch. Let's take a look. We'll stop the scope, roll it back to the. Okay, now we're doing better. Okay, it looks better at the top. I can see. Okay, as far as current, okay, we're about 836. That's pretty good. That's good. And we level off at about 146. I did not talk about this in the other two. I apologize, but nonetheless, obviously in the other two batteries it will be less. Right here is what I call the relative compression zone of cranking. It's that moment when the car is going from cranking to running. We're about 143 amps there, which is good. As far as our voltage, let's take a look at that. But I always say we want to be north of 8.5, and we certainly are. We're 9.2. We're 9.2 there, and then our normal zone, I call it the cranking zone, we're about 11.23, which is excellent. The alternator, again, the Rock of Gibraltar is doing its job. It's 107 amps, so nonetheless, let me do the flip, and I'll get the Russian current on this one and see if it's less than the other guys. I got it running. I will take the red guy and get that back to the 200 amp range. I could probably leave it at 2000, but just want to get a better, more granulated reading. Although the 2000 amp range does quite well with this clamp. Let me take it here. I go 2000 amp clamp, 200 amp mode. I'll go to 50. In fact, I'll go to 20. I'll make it more granulated. I'll zero the clamp. This little spike there. Now we have current going into the battery. This is called Russian current. That was the title of this demonstration, Russian current. Be mindful of it. It can cause multiple alternator failure if it's excessive. Let's look at this. We'll filter. Car is idling. The current is going in. I'll stop it. Filter. Okay. Nonetheless, okay, let's see what the Russian current is in this case. Russian current, okay, that is very low. See, that's pretty low. That's that's about 1 amp. That's real good. Then you cut the car loose to the customer, and you can have that, the peace of mind that the alternator is not going to be overtaxed as far as having to put out too much. How about our voltage at the battery? Running voltage 13.89, and the output of the alternator probably going to be less because it doesn't have the burden of the battery like it did in the other two cases right there. Okay, 14.57. So this battery right here will be low maintenance. That's just the term, meaning it doesn't ask so much from the alternator. The alternator's got to run other things on the car, fuel pump, ignition, things like that. Anyway, just be mindful of Russian current. Make sure it's south of 10 before you cut the car loose. You don't want to overtax the alternator. I'm signing off. Thanks for watching. All the best.